This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In 1935, legendary gangster Dutch Schultz was ambushed by an underworld rival at a tavern in New Jersey. On his deathbed, Schultz reportedly rambled incoherently about his mother, his enemies, and his ill-gotten $7 million fortune buried in rural upstate New York. But when Dutch died, he took the secret of his alleged lost treasure with him to the grave. When 5-year-old Lauren Jackson disappeared, an eyewitness account led police to believe she'd been abducted by a stranger. Then a few months later, another witness came forward with a stunning accusation. Lauren's own mother may have been involved in the kidnapping. Beware of the classifieds. In September of 1992, a man calling himself Tom Johnson answered an ad for a computer system. But Johnson had no intention of paying for his purchase. Instead, he had hatched a con game of deadly proportion. Just outside Dallas, Texas, a young boy and his mother were murdered by a ruthless, unknown assailant. Authorities hope one of our viewers will recognize several items left behind by the killer. Crucial evidence that may lead to the suspect's identity and capture. Join me. Perhaps you hold the one vital clue that will help solve one of tonight's unsolved mysteries. On a cool, moonless night some 60 years ago, two shadowy figures dug along the banks of Esopus Creek, 100 miles north of New York City.
All right, Lulu, that's enough.
The man doing all the work was Bernard Rosenkrantz, nicknamed oddly enough Lulu. His boss was the infamous Dutch Schultz, king of the New York underworld. According to legend, Dutch buried a strongbox that night containing a king's ransom of cash, bonds, unset diamonds, and gold coins. Today, it would be worth more than $50 million. That is, of course, if it ever existed. Like most tales of buried treasure, this one comes with a familiar wet blanket disclaimer. But let's face it, we love these tales. Perhaps because they often spring up around society's villains, its pirates, thieves, and gangsters. Men just like Dutch Schultz. The legend of his lost treasure is rooted smack in the middle of one of America's most colorful periods, the Roaring '20s. The decade came by its nickname honestly. Prohibition was passed in 1919. The criminal element was in its element. Bootleg liquor became an art form whose manufacture and distribution made millions for ruthless gangsters like Legs Diamond, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, and Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz was something of a criminal prodigy. Born Arthur Flegenheimer in 1902, he was already a force to be reckoned with by the time he was 25. He adopted his name from a notorious gang lord who had flourished in another era.
Dutch Schultz was a very successful and widespread bootlegger, owned a string of speakeasies, and then quickly branched out into narcotics, the numbers racket, and the protection racket. Schultz was an extremely dangerous gangster. He was reported to have had 136 people killed, and that's over a criminal career of less than 10 years.
As the Roaring Twenties came to a close, Dutch Schultz's criminal empire was netting more than $20 million a year. In 1933, Dutch earned a dubious distinction. He was named public enemy #1 by the Justice Department. Like Al Capone before him, Schultz was highly vulnerable to the newly enacted federal income tax laws. When he was indicted by a grand jury for income tax evasion, he did what gangsters do. He went on the lam.
At the time, Dutch Schultz was facing a long prison sentence, and he decided that he needed a nest egg to fall back on in case he was sent to prison. So he had his top lieutenants clean out his safety deposit boxes and gather together whatever cash they could from his available bank accounts.
Beautiful. Looks good, boss.
At a hideaway in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Dutch and his henchmen, including Lulu Rosencrantz and a man named Marty Crompier, rendezvoused. According to gangland legend, they stacked bundles of $1,000 bills and negotiable Liberty bonds, together with a trove of gold coins, unmounted diamonds, and other gems into a steel-plated strongbox.
Hey, Marty, go get me something to drink.
Dutch Schultz had the only key. That very night, Dutch and the faithful Lulu made their fabled nocturnal journey across the Hudson River towards Phoenicia, New York, a tiny hamlet Dutch knew well from his bootlegging days. Dutch swore Lulu to secrecy, then allegedly marked the site by carving an X into the trunk of a nearby tree. But Lulu couldn't keep his mouth shut. He wasted no time in spilling the beans to his crony, Marty Crompier.
I shouldn't tell you this, but I think it'd be good for somebody else to know.
Know what?
Remember that strong box that me and Dutch buried upstate a few weeks ago?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, I'm gonna tell you where we buried it.
Some say Lulu even drew Marty a map.
I ain't gotta worry about you doing anything stupid, do I?
Me and the Dutchman, we're like this, and he's gonna take care of me.
Dutch.
As it turned out, Marty was none too good at keeping his mouth shut either.
And just where is this nest egg?
Lulu drew me this map, and I got it right here in my wallet.
Listen, Marty.
Rumors of Dutch's secret treasure filtered through New York, but he had other troubles to contend with. Specifically, Manhattan's crime-busting district attorney, Thomas E. Dewey. Dewey would later become famous for almost but not quite beating out Harry S. Truman in the 1948 presidential elections. But in 1934, he was determined to make a career out of squashing Dutch Schultz and his illegal empire. With the pressure building, Schultz finally surrendered to authorities in Albany, New York. His first trial resulted in a hung jury. At his second trial, he was acquitted of all charges for lack of evidence. By Dutch's design, both trials had taken place in upstate New York, where he could jury tamper in peace, far from Thomas E. Dewey. After the acquittal, Dutch Schultz moved his headquarters to New Jersey, specifically to the Palace Chophouse, a tavern he owned in Newark. Determined to regain control of his empire, Dutch went on a bloody killing spree, thereby alienating the powerful New York crime syndicate.
The syndicate was a confederation of New York City mobsters who controlled virtually all the crime in the Manhattan area. And they were very afraid that he was bringing additional heat upon them with these killings.
The heat came in the form of Schultz's old nemesis, Thomas E. Dewey. Finally, Dutch decided to get rid of Dewey.
Hey, let me tell you something. Dewey's just another politician, and I never met a politician who couldn't be bought.
I don't think you can buy off Dewey.
Well, if I can't buy him off, then we'll just have to bump him off.
What, are you crazy? You can't bump off Dewey.
He's right, boss.
Hey, nobody asked you your opinion, Lulu, so shut up.
In the back room of the Palace Chophouse, Dutch's trusted lieutenants tried to talk him out of it.
Arthur, you can't go around saying you're going to bump off Dewey.
Maybe you're right. I'm just gonna go splash some water on my face.
Dutch Schultz headed for the men's room. Perhaps he would have listened to reason when he returned, but it was too late. The syndicate had already taken matters into its own hands. The date was October 23rd, 1935.
Well, they took Schultz to the hospital, and he lingered on until the next evening, and all the time issuing a delirium series of statements.
How many shots were fired at me?
The police actually had a court stenographer in the room with him taking down everything he said, most of which was unintelligible.
Kindly take my shoes off. They're still on. They feel like handcuffs. I wonder who owns these woods.
Dutch hung on for nearly 22 hours. Once he allegedly begged to be taken to Phoenicia, where the strongbox was buried. To the police, it was only the babbling of a dying man.
Come and get me if he says anything useful.
Dutch Schultz finally died at 8:35 p.m. on October 24, 1935. He was 33 years old. His trusted bodyguard, Lulu Rosenkrantz, had died hours earlier. That left only one man who knew where the treasure was buried, Marty Krompier. Too late, Marty learned that the blonde he had blabbed to was friends with Jake Shapiro, a mobster who had a few henchmen of his own.
I don't believe you. Let me see it.
The night of the Chophouse Murders, the two henchmen caught up with Marty at a barber shop in New York City, gunned him down, and took the map. Krompier survived the attack, but he was never able to locate the treasure without the map. Jake Shapiro made several attempts at finding the treasure from the map, as did several other gangsters of the era, but none were successful.
I think buried treasure is always fascinating, and certainly when you add the element of the gangsters to it, it becomes even more of a popular story. Because we're interested in the gangsters, because they represent, unfortunately, a flamboyant side of our society, which, although evil, can be compelling to people. If people knew about it, Schultz's closest associates, they told other people, I would suspect strongly that it had been retrieved long before now.
I personally believe the treasure of Dutch Schultz was buried, and there's a good possibility that it still exists today. Because even though the Liberty bonds have long since matured in the last 60+ years, none have ever been redeemed.
Did Dutch Schultz leave an ill-gotten fortune buried along the banks of Esopus Creek in upstate New York? Those who believe say that someday, somewhere, someone will stumble across a tree scarred with an X and hit the jackpot. Next, a classified ad leads two innocent people into a deadly trap. In today's high-tech marketplace, more and more people are using the classifieds to buy and sell computers. In September of 1992, a music video company in Nashville ran these notices in a local trade publication, hoping to sell a top-of-the-line computer system valued at more than $30,000. At the time, it seemed inconceivable that the ads would lead to murder.
Okay, if you've got a couple minutes, I'd like to ask you some specific questions about it, because I'm really interested.
On October 7th, 1992, a man calling himself Tom Johnson answered the ads. He said he was a freelance computer programmer and database consultant. A few days later, Johnson met with a videotape editor named Jeremy for a demonstration.
I'm mainly concerned with a fast processor.
The two men eventually agreed on a price of $31,000. Johnson requested that the computer system be delivered to his office in Marietta, Georgia, several hundred miles from Nashville. October 24th, 1992, 1:30 a.m. Jeremy and his fiancée, Heather Uffelman, set off on a 5-hour trek to deliver the computer to Tom Johnson.
That you were attracted to me. I'd been working for about 30 hours on another project and was completely exhausted.
I didn't know if I should come in either.
And I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find anybody except Heather at this point, and I'd like to take her along anyway because, you know, we enjoy taking trips together.
7:30 a.m. After driving all night, Jeremy and Heather arrived at Tom Johnson's motel in Marietta.
Originally, we had been set to meet in an industrial park, but he said that the directions to the industrial park were so complex that he would prefer to meet us first at his motel, which made perfect sense to me because I've spent a lot of time lost in industrial parks trying to find an unposted address somewhere.
Come on in.
Tom, hi. How you doing? This is my fiance, Heather.
We arrived a little early, I think. But he said that his business partner would be along shortly, and he was bringing the certified check.
He's gonna bring it here, and he should be here in about half an hour, 45 minutes.
I suggested that we go and get breakfast if we had to wait for a while because Heather and I were really hungry. So we left, and when we came back maybe half an hour later, he said that his business manager had called and was on the way and would be there shortly.
Yeah, I think it'll really save some time if we just transfer it between your car.
Where's he coming from, you know?
He's coming from the
8
office.
a.m. Johnson suggested that Jeremy and Heather load the computer into his car while they waited for Johnson's partner to arrive with a check.
We so trusted this guy, it didn't strike me as being odd.
I'm so excited.
There were absolutely no clues that this guy was anything but what he said he was. He was very good at making people believe that he was legitimate.
Think about how computer technologies influenced every aspect of our society.
The three returned to Johnson's motel room and made small talk for 20 minutes. Finally, Jeremy grew tired of waiting.
Tom, I've been up about 30 hours. If you knew where your president was, we could close this deal.
I think we can close this deal right now.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding. Put your money belt over there and get down on your knees. You, stand up. Take the sheet off that bed and lay it down here on the floor. Hurry up. Put the sheet down here. Lay it on the ground.
Why are you doing this, Tom? Why'd you lie?
Shut up. Lay down.
The person we'd been talking to before was this kind of thoughtful, introspective guy interested in computers, and then this person who was pointing the gun was cold and calculating and deliberate. He knew exactly what he wanted to do.
Now lay down in it. Roll yourself up in it. Your company's going to get an insurance check, and I'm going to get the computer, and everybody's going to be fine. Look away. Don't look at her.
And so I turned my head away from him, and then a second later, I hear a sharp buzzing in my ear, almost like a siren, and the whole room spins because he's struck me in the back of the head. And then he moved over to Heather, and I saw him raise his hand up and bring it down, and when he did, Heather screamed this horrible scream, so he kept hitting her.
Stop screaming and he'll leave!
So he came back over and hit me more, and then went back over and hit her more. And then as he backed out of the room, still pointing the gun at us, he dusted the countertop for fingerprints as he walked out of the room. And as soon as he left, I crawled over to Heather and I told her that I was going to get help and that we were going to be okay. And what I saw haunts me. You know, I can't get the picture out of my head. I mean, that someone could so hurt such a gentle person.
Heather and Jeremy were rushed to a nearby hospital. 2 hours later, Heather Uffelman died of massive skull injuries.
I went right over to him, and I calmed him
Meanwhile,
down.
the authorities questioned witnesses and searched the motel room for evidence. Among the few clues that Johnson left behind was the murder weapon.
The hammer was still wrapped in plastic, still had the card identifying its weight, its SKU number, but we have not been able to trace exactly which store it was purchased from.
Beautiful. Oh, I can hardly wait.
This is a very unusual robbery in the fact that he would allow himself to be seen in public in daylight.
I think we can close this deal right now.
It's unusual that he had a handgun, especially a small caliber handgun. Didn't use this handgun to kill the victims.
Police learned of yet another curious circumstance that occurred approximately an hour before the attack.
Yes, ma'am. May I help you?
Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance down in room 332.
An unknown woman had complained of a problem in the motel room rented to Tom Johnson. At that time, Jeremy and Heather had gone out for breakfast.
No, but there's a lot of noise going on.
Well, ma'am, it sounds like a domestic dispute. We try not to get involved with the domestic dispute.
Investigators now believe that the woman may have been an accomplice of Johnson's, who attempted to sabotage the scheme when she learned that he intended to murder his
I
victims.
wouldn't come down here if I didn't think this was urgent.
If we could locate the mystery woman that entered into the motel that morning, maybe she could give us further information, or anybody at the motel, if they would come forward and give us any further information on the vehicle or this suspect called Tom Johnson, or if anybody has any information on the computer, its whereabouts.
The vehicle that Tom Johnson was driving was a Dodge Dynasty, black cherry color, with a red interior and Tennessee license plates. Tom Johnson is in his late 20s or early 30s, approximately 6 feet tall and weighing 165 pounds. He has sandy brown hair and may be wearing glasses. He was last seen wearing an expensive pair of boots made of either snake or alligator skin.
Tom Johnson is a riddle. He had a smile and a way of talking to you that made you feel very much at ease. Tom Johnson could be someone's coworker. It could be someone's acquaintance, and they would have no clue that this other side is there at all until it was too late.
This is the same computer model the man calling himself Tom Johnson stole from Jeremy. It is a Macintosh Quadra 950 used for desktop publishing or videotape editing. Perhaps someone in our audience purchased the unit from Tom Johnson. At this point, the police have evidence that Johnson tried to pull a similar scam just 1 week before he murdered Heather Uffelman. But for some unknown reason, Johnson never showed up for the appointment. When we return, after a 5-year-old girl disappears, her grieving mother finds herself a suspect. On a chilly October evening in 1988, 200 rescue workers and volunteers swarmed into the tiny township of East Vincent, Pennsylvania. At a moment's notice, they had put their lives on hold to launch a search for one of their own. A 5-year-old girl named Lauren Jackson was missing.
At the time, I was in shock. And I really didn't realize, because I always thought, she's right here. She'll come up, she'll come home, Mommy. And this is all for naught. But when daylight came, she wasn't home.
Lauren Jackson has been missing for more than 5 years. In a case like this, anyone and everyone becomes a suspect. Since Lauren vanished, her case has taken a number of bizarre turns. And when all is said and done, many people believe the prime suspect is a member of Lauren's family, her own mother. Lauren's parents, Christina O'Donnell and Mickey Jackson, were never married. They split in 1987 when Lauren was 4 years old. Lauren lived with her mother, but in September of 1988, Christina was arrested for attempting to illegally obtain prescription drugs. Soon after, Mickey told Lauren he planned to file for custody of her.
Thanks.
A month later, on October 4th, 1988, Christina took Lauren and her other daughter out for dinner. The day had been so normal it was almost mundane. But within 2 hours, Lauren Jackson would be gone.
I remember all day asking me for a cheeseburger. And I finally gave in and took her down, got her a cheeseburger. And we ate, and I let her go out and play with Brian to dig in the dirt, because she loved to do that.
Brian was a 6-year-old boy who lived 3 doors down from Lauren and Christina in the Park Springs apartment complex.
And I was outside sweeping, watching her. And I walked in, and I put the broom in the house and cleaned up my kitchen counters and went out, and she was gone.
Christina says that 20 minutes had elapsed. She immediately went to Brian's apartment. According to Christina, no one was home.
I found out later that his mom had went to the mall, and they left Lauren outside. But she wasn't out there when I went out.
When I showed up at Park Springs that night and got out of the car, there was people mobilizing and fire engine trucks and just a whole lot of pretty hectic. I was hoping for the best at the time. You know, you were kind of overwhelmed by everything. You know, so you couldn't believe it was happening to you.
What is all this?
Well, there are a lot of people out here looking for Lauren.
At the time Lauren disappeared, Jim Cody was East Vincent's police chief.
Anything you can tell us at all to help us find her? Had probably 250 people out going through weeds and bushes, combing the area looking for the child. Rescue units from the surrounding area cleared 19 ponds in 2 days.
By the next morning, the police, using bloodhounds and a professional tracker, uncovered evidence that Lauren had either wandered or been dragged towards Route 724, a quarter of a mile from her home. When an 11-year-old girl came forward with an eyewitness account, everyone's worst fears seemed to be confirmed. The girl was certain that the child she saw was Lauren, but the investigation soon stalled for lack of further evidence. Then, a few months later, another witness came forward with stunning new information that pointed the finger of suspicion directly at Lauren's mother, Christina.
A witness told us that Lauren was not kidnapped and that she saw Christina give Lauren away to a couple in the Jamesway Mall on October 4th of 1988.
According to the witness, at around 7 p.m., she was in the mall parking lot when she heard a child yelling. The witness reported seeing a woman, possibly the child's mother, hand the young girl to a couple in a parked car. The day after the witness came forward, Police Chief Jim Cody showed up unannounced at Christina's apartment.
I stopped by for the recent photo that I asked you about.
From across the street, the witness and FBI agents were watching.
That's the woman. That's the woman I saw.
She observed Christina and told us that she was 100% positive that that was the same woman that she saw give Lauren away on October 4th of 1988.
My whole thought is she saw my picture in the paper. Either maybe she mistaked me for somebody else. Maybe she just is one of those kind of people that like to go to the police or the FBI. There are people like that. Why, I don't know.
Christina O'Donnell staunchly maintains that she had nothing to do with her daughter's disappearance and points to a major discrepancy in the witness's story.
It's so hard to believe.
The witness placed Lauren and Christina in the parking lot at 7 p.m. However, residents at Christina's apartment complex clearly recall seeing Lauren playing in her front yard as late as 7:15.
I don't doubt that she may have seen a child and a mother in the mall.
The current East Vincent Police Chief, Bill Dembski, believes the witness was mistaken.
She's quite sure at the time she was there. There's other people that live in the complex where Lauren disappeared from that are quite sure at the times that Lauren was still in the complex.
Mickey Jackson is convinced that Christina was involved.
Oh, I'd bet my life on it that she did it, and I feel certain that it's because two reasons tied together. Number one, to spite me, and number two, she's just overwhelmed with the responsibility of raising a child.
Everyone was a suspect in the beginning. Mickey Jackson was a suspect. He can probably relate the phone conversation I had with him at the night of the disappearance. He wasn't too happy with that. He took offense at being an initial suspect. There are other suspects along the route of that long and tedious investigatory process, and you work through them. Christina O'Donnell, given this scenario, would be a suspect.
Ultimately, a grand jury in East Vincent was asked to consider whether Christina O'Donnell should be charged in connection with the disappearance of her daughter. After 4 months, the grand jury declined to take action. Today, there is only one absolute fact in this troubling case. Lauren Jackson has not been seen since the day she disappeared more than 5 years ago.
There's got to be a trail somewhere. Just that we were so far behind it that we're here and the trail's there. You know, we need somebody to put us on the trail.
A lot of times I give up hope, but there's always just that glimmer that I'll see her again.
Next, authorities in Dallas, Texas need your help to solve a brutal double murder. Just a few days before Christmas in 1981, the Dallas County, Texas Sheriff's Department was preparing for their annual holiday lunch.
I'd like to, but I need to get back on the streets. It's gonna be good.
It was a Wednesday, December 23rd, a day that no one in the department will ever forget. At about 11:45 a.m., Officer Roy Baird was still on duty, patrolling an area 10 miles outside Dallas. His attention was drawn to a car parked on the wrong side of a dirt road with one door hanging open.
This vehicle appeared to be suspicious to me, and I decided to check it out. And upon checking the hood, I found that the car was still warm.
On the back seat was a pile of brightly wrapped Christmas gifts. On the front seat, a blue sports bag, a pair of women's gloves, and a purse. With the instinct born of 15 years' experience, Officer Baird quickly concluded that someone was in dire trouble.
I felt that there was possibly a rape going on, or that a female had been raped. I then called for cover and made my entrance into the field on the north side of the road. I very slowly and cautiously made my way towards a tree line that was to the northeast. I observed a small boy that appeared to be crumpled to the ground, and lying next to him was a white female that was covered with a blanket. I touched him and his body was still warm. I felt at that time that whoever did this was possibly still in the area. And I could not believe that someone had shot this little boy this close to Christmas.
That same day, the victims were identified as 30-year-old Roxanne Jeeves and her 5-year-old son, Christopher. More than 12 years have passed since the brutal double murder, but it still grips the investigating officers as though it happened yesterday. For them, the case is far from over. They hope that tonight, one of our viewers will provide the critical information necessary to solve this troubling mystery. Roxanne Jeeves had moved to Dallas after a divorce. She worked for an insurance company and enjoyed country western dancing. Roxanne was engaged to be remarried in June of 1982. Friends describe Roxanne's son Christopher as happy and outgoing. He had turned 5 years old on Wednesday, December 23rd, 1981, the very day he was murdered.
Where you go?
That morning, Roxanne and Christopher planned to embark on a special Christmas trip to visit relatives in Kansas. Concerned that her car might break down on the long journey, Roxanne told neighbors she planned to take along her toolbox. About 1 hour before the murders, a man authorities believe was the killer was seen by a neighbor outside Roxanne's apartment complex. It was the first of many eyewitness reports that enabled investigators to piece together this appalling crime.
We located a neighbor of Roxanne's who left about the time that Christopher came out the door with the red toolbox. Matter of fact, she spoke to Christopher. In the process of going to her car, she saw the man carrying the toolbox in one hand and Christopher by the hand as they went around the corner where she believed Roxanne's car was parked. She said they looked rough, they looked nervous. She described them as not fitting in the complex.
Check under your hood.
30 minutes later, at about 11 a.m., the suspect was seen again. This time he was with Roxanne and Christopher in their car. The man's female companion was no longer with him.
He was acting kind of nervous. He had his hands down between his legs. He never looked up at me. He never said anything. He just stared at the pool board. You could tell that she was nervous, and when I looked at her, she looked me right in the eyes, and you could tell then she was nervous that something was wrong. Her little boy was in the back seat, and I thought, well, he acts like everything's all right.
Very much.
I told one of my fellow employees, I said, it's going to be something if something happens to that woman, because she acted awful strange.
Sometime during the next half hour, Roxanne and Christopher were murdered.
I'm afraid that she saw her son killed, and then she and the killer had quite a struggle before she was initially shot twice herself.
20 out of 2 murder victims.
The bodies were still warm when Officer Baird found them at 11:45. He immediately called backup units to the scene. At the very moment support officers were arriving, the suspect was seen fleeing the area. A total of 8 eyewitnesses saw the alleged killer either running or hitchhiking away from the scene. Meanwhile, less than a mile away, investigators were gathering evidence that may someday convict him. In making his quick getaway, the suspect had inadvertently left behind a blue sports pack, literally a bag of clues.
It's not going to be her stuff.
A pre-World War II holster, possibly a collector's item.
Burglar tools.
A set of burglary tools.
Cap, bag, we need some hair here.
A toboggan hat. And finally, a bottle of formaldehyde. It would be the first hint that the case was linked in some way to drugs.
Ooh, formaldehyde.
It was popular among heavy drug users then to lace a marijuana cigarette with formaldehyde. Locally here, they called it a Sherman stick.
Investigators were still at the murder scene when the suspect burst into a gas station just 5 miles away, demanding to use the phone.
I need to use the phone.
Got a payphone right out there on the corner, sir. Right there where that little sign is.
There's a phone right there. Let me use that phone right there.
I'm sorry, that's a business phone. Can't let you.
Come on, lady.
I can't let you use that phone, sir. If you want to make a call, you can use that payphone right out there on the corner. It's right out there, sir.
He was there at the gas station for 15 to 20 minutes. She said that he used the telephone. The last time she saw him, he wandered off towards Interstate 635.
The suspect was seen one final time. This sighting led authorities to believe that he may have had an accomplice.
I seen this man run down the hill from a service station, and I thought it might have been a robbery because there was a car on the side of the road slowing down and stopping to pick him up.
Roy Morris described the getaway car as a green 1955 Buick. The driver was a heavy-set black male. In the wake of the murder, anonymous tips flooded police hotlines. Several callers made the same suggestion: talk to Roxanne's brother, Army Private Kurt Jeeves. Investigators learned that before joining the service in August of 1981, Kurt had stayed with Roxanne and Christopher in their Dallas apartment.
I think so. I'm gonna try real hard. All right, Maggie.
When Kurt moved out to go to the Army, people have told us that Roxanne was relieved.
Bye.
We know that he was dealing in marijuana, and at some point in time, he had a disagreement with these folks over some of their transactions with regard to this marijuana.
According to Roxanne's friends, late one night, a man showed up unexpectedly at her apartment.
Kurt's not here.
What do you mean he's not here?
Kurt.
Police believe that when Kurt left to join the Army, his former associates were still angry. Roxanne may have found herself trapped in the middle of a bitter, drug-related dispute.
Kurt owed me some money, and I'm gonna find him. And I will find him.
2 years later, in 1984, Kurt Jeeves was himself murdered during an attempted drug buy. He had always angrily insisted that he had no information that might shed light on the deaths of his sister and nephew.
This case occurred at Christmas time, and I'm sure that myself and all the other detectives will never forget what we saw out there that day. Whomever committed that offense doesn't need to be free in our society, and I don't intend to ever give up trying to find that person.
On our next Unsolved Mysteries, 2 stories of death defined by overpowering love. In one, a mother's pain over the loss of her child was eased when she was contacted by what she believes was a spirit of her daughter. And a woman raising 2 young sons after the death of her husband says she found solace when he appeared to her. Some say these after-death visits are pure hallucination. Others claim they are all too real. Also, a case of utmost urgency. A serial killer is stalking and murdering young women in the Midwest. Perhaps you can help catch the I-70 killer. Join me next time. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery.
Thank you.